So I'm going to hand over to Andy now, who's going to dig into some of the issues raised with some questions to our speakers, and we're also inviting you folks to put your questions into the Q&A box. You can find that down at the bottom, and if you put your questions in, we will get as many of them answered as possible. But let's start with you, Andy, and the questions you have, and hopefully a little bit of discussion between our panelists.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Michelle. I don't want to I suppose, deny our members too much of an opportunity. So I'm only going to ask one or two sort of questions that seem to fit across what everybody's been sort of pondering upon. But I'm really struck by this idea of those voices who are not present. So it's really nice that you raised, Marlene, the importance of Aris and obviously all of his friends, because these are the people that aren't present today. These are the people that we are working towards and striving towards to think about preparing them for the 21st century. And so I think that was really nice that we ended in such a way. So I suppose I wanted to start with the concept that Adam sort of raised right at the beginning when he was talking about the reviews, and he talked about the balance of divergent and convergent student goals. And you emphasized that as being something that was important. And, you know, what we've heard from school art and perhaps from others, that there's quite a different picture out there, and I think even in your own research. So I wondered if you could just talk a little bit more about that and tell us, explain to us a little bit more about the importance of that balance and what you mean. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does, yes. So during our visits, the 50 schools that we visited as part of the research review, but also through our general inspection, we do see a really broad range of experience that pupils have access to, and some schools focus, as was highlighted, really strictly on those on things like drawing with different tone or the color wheel or whatever it might be, and looking very strictly at particular skills. And other schools, it's a real focus on just explore. This is an opportunity for you to express yourself without giving those techniques and skills that pupils need in order to be able to achieve that. And so what there needs to be is that balance of opportunities to show that pupils can apply different skills that they're being taught, and then to use that to then express themselves in their own work more fully. So in the same way as we would within English, we wouldn't expect pupils to be able to write a meaningful poem unless they had actually learnt about poetry and about its form. And so learning about its form, learning and not necessarily copying, but learning some of those skills is really key to then being able to use and apply that in their own work.
Thank you. That's great. So, Will, given what we've heard from the school art, where we're talking about here about, I suppose, student choice, do you think the schools are getting the balance right?
It's a difficult question, isn't it? And I think it's, for me, all of those decisions, it's not for me to say, because really it's for the individual teachers as agentic professionals in their context, in their school, who know the demographic of learner that they work with, to calibrate the contents of their curriculum appropriately. In terms of what I see when I go into schools, to take a kind of abstract view on that question, Andy, I don't think there is enough agency, but I think you model, don't you? And I think if teachers have had their agency restricted over the last 20 years, it's very difficult from that position to be able to encourage agency amongst learners. It's a reproductive process rather than a progressive one. So I think that's problematic, but it's a systematic problem, which makes it a terribly difficult one to deal with. Carol.
Yeah, I would be cautious about interpreting what Adam was saying, that the teaching of techniques and the giving creative agency to students are delivered in two separate tasks, so that you start with giving students a convergent activity where everybody has the same outcome, and then and only then do you move on to being able to give them a divergent activity where they're able to express themselves. I think actually research in art and design education over many years has shown that actually the best way is often to do those two things together in the same activity. So Elliot Eisner discusses that in Arts and the Creation of Mind. I think it's perhaps a misuse of Bernstein's theories of knowledge, to think that in creative activity that you have to learn the skill first before you can be creative with it. You can learn the skill through being creative with it, and I think that's an important thing for teachers to remember when you've got restricted curriculum time and restricted resources. It may, if you're seeking to teach the skill first before you give them the power to be creative with it, you may just run out of time. And so if particularly at Key Stage 3, if the only experiences that students are being given in art and design are endless convergent outcomes, the sense of engagement that students have in the subject is over time eroded. And I think one of the particular aims of Key Stage 3 curriculum should be to build engagement in the subject as well as teaching skills.
Just to come in on that again, Andy, I know we're limited for time, but some of the nuance in that was really interesting in our report. We found that hardly anybody spoke explicitly about creativity as an intended outcome in the curriculum they delivered. The language of creativity had been almost entirely replaced with conversations around confidence and how art and design in the art classroom is about confidence for learners. And that says something about maybe this dialectic between the technical and the creative, and maybe which one of those is being seen, or the kind of false binary as Carol describes it in the classroom space.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. Joe, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, I think that would also sort of links to one of the themes we found, which was sort of the pupils' dialogic. I can't say that word now.
Dialogic.
Yeah, they're not, like the knowledge that they interweave when they're studying it. And I think something I saw yesterday, I went to a school to watch with my trainee teachers, who is like, like one of those trainee teachers that you just, like you just want to like hug and go, yes, because they're so good. But she was doing a project called Make a Statement. So this idea of the pupils, something really important to the pupils was being investigated, and then that develops alongside, like working with printmaking, working with like learning how to sew, like using textiles. So it kind of, it starts in that way, like Carol was saying. It starts with the, like something that pupils have just really completely invested in, and then the other things happen alongside that as well. This is what I've kind of noticed yesterday.
Thank you, Joe. Marlene, did you want to add, and then we'll sort of open it up perhaps to the chat, Michelle. If you'd like to pick us something from the chat, that would be really helpful, Michelle.
Yes, thank you very much, Andy. Joe, I just want to kind of reiterate what you're saying, really, which is what I was thinking before you then said what you said, which is great, was that, I've heard and seen where educators, their curriculum is driven by the behaviour of the students in the classroom. And I would like to think that what can happen and what educators can think about is designing a curriculum that engages their students. So knowing who is in front of them, getting to know who is in front of them, and designing a curriculum that will allow for the sort of convergent, divergent practices that we want to see. But it's being really, really clear about who is in front of us and how do we need to engage them so that we can design a really rich curriculum where they're learning really richly.
Great. Zainab, I was just going to ask if you're okay. One of the magnificent things that I thought came across with your presentation is the number of partnerships that you are involved with, which are a very rich resource for you to be able to use to work with your people, with your young people. You talked about the Whitechapel, you talked about Tate Britain, you talked about The Line, you talked about Art Matters, all of these, which I know are really superb, and through your examples, superb ways of you being to explore. I suppose the simple question is, how are they letting you out? Because I would imagine most schools these days are quite, how can I say this tactfully, quite restrictive in allowing you to go anywhere.
Oh, that's a really good question. It's just a lot of planning in meetings. I think that kind of really starts it all off. My senior leadership, they're really supportive and they're very advocates in allowing these amazing opportunities to work with our schools. So they're very supportive in allowing me to, go out and meet individuals, the education departments itself, the creators, and, have that meeting to sort of build that dialogue up first. And it does take time, I'll have to admit to that. But I think once you've got an idea and plan is set in place, then, you can then go back and sort of share that with SLT and then sort of put everything in place. So one has to be somewhat very patient to put everything in place in order for it to work. But it does work, and it just shows in the presentation I shared that, with a lot of passion and love with the subject, it can work. And of course, the children, as you can see there, have done a remarkable job in sort of enjoying the experience, and it's not something that will probably come their way or may not even have the chance to visit a gallery or museum. So bringing that into school really gives them that amazing opportunity, and hopefully that will inspire them in the future as well.
Yeah, thank you. I'm a big fan of Art Matters, and I think that kind of collaboration in a community between primary, secondary, and HE has historically had some wonderful results. So I'm really pleased to see that you continue. So Michelle, tell us, have you got some questions from the audience that you'd like us to engage with?
Oh yes, there's lots, and what I will say is there are lots of questions, and we don't have time to answer them all. What we'll do is we'll harvest these questions and we will put them to the panel beyond this session, and then we will send them back to you so that you do get some reflections on these really excellent questions, because they are really good. So I'm just going to pick out some themes and group some things, if I may. Leadership is coming through, and how do you, so picking up on what you were just discussing with Zainab there, Ronnie Brown from UAL says, not a particularly knowledgeable form of school leadership seems to be critical. So what does good leadership look like? And linked to that, and this is specifically for Zainab, how did your art position come about? It's rare to have specialists in primary schools, so Kerry's interested to know if it was a decision by leadership, or if you were able to sell this position, that might be helpful for people. So Zainab, how did your position come about? But generally, leadership, what does good leadership look like within the school system that enables art, craft and design?
I'm just trying to think back. It's been such a long time. I'm sure, obviously, before becoming an art specialist, I was actually a class teacher in Key Stage 1, and also being an art lead alongside that. And I think from then, it was just, like you said, sort of selling it and having that conversation of where that potential might be. And in that case, it was, supported by the senior leadership that let's give this a go and see where that goes from there. And since then, it's been really flourishing. It's been going, from strength to strength within the classroom with, organization that you've seen earlier on. And that's how it evolves. So I'm not sure if I've really answered the question, because it's sort of, it's getting me thinking now, really, how it all started. But what does good leadership look like? I mentioned that, you want to include art into, the whole school strategic plan. So that's really important. And that's also getting the leadership to recognize that, the significance and the importance of why art is very helpful for the children's learning and well-being. So in that sense, you know, it shows that they're taking care into consideration of their children's needs, and that also flourishes not just within art but within other subjects as well. So I believe that leadership's being strong is that they have confidence in you and they have belief in you, that you really want to make a difference and make a huge impact within, you know, the children's well-being and their learning.
Oh, thank you. That's a really powerful message, and I've got to say that's where we sit at NSEAD, that if we can be better, be the best we can be as professionals, that's the best starting point to influence leadership and everyone around us. I'm also getting a sense in the questions of hope, but also overwhelm. And actually, you know, people are really, they know what they want, but the barriers are feeling considerable. So to give an example, the question we have here, I've recently had Key Stage 3 curriculum stripped from 78 lessons to 16. So we'll all let that sit for a moment, and we're all, yeah, sharp intake of breath. Feels impossible to get breadth and depth. Any ideas? And linked to that, you know, and linked again to how do we influence leadership? How do you approach leadership and persuade them not to remove SEND students for maths and English catch-up, taking them out of their art and design lessons? So ideas, with all these barriers that are very real, what can people do on the ground? Anyone with ideas, go for it.
With regard to not removing pupils from lessons, highlight that all pupils have a right to an artistic education, that it's not only in the national curriculum, but it's in the independent school standards, that there is that minimum standard of having an artistic education, and so they have a right to be there as every other child does, and call it out. The biggest lever that we have as an institution, as Ofsted, is when we report on things, and if it's seen as not happening in some schools and we report on it, then people listen, people take notice of when that happens.
That's a powerful message from Adam there. Call it out, call it out. I'm going to pick up on that, actually, that notion of call it out, because it is their right and entitlement. And you know, we talk a lot about entitlement of our learners to a great art, craft and design education. We've got a question here which is about the extent to which, you know, we work with pupils to make that happen. So Karen asks, Karen Esley from National Gallery, how much are pupils being asked to inspire their peers in the classroom, sharing artists who inspire them? And Karen gives the example of young people who take part in articulation. So yeah, how important is it to involve pupils in that process? And how do we do it? We'll go for it.
I mean, I don't have a full answer, but it strikes me as resonant with the last question around maybe students as advocates for our subject within their own institutions, and you know, amongst the senior leadership of a school. Perhaps if, you know, teachers' advocacy for subject or curriculum time is falling short, then it might be worthwhile looking at a more sort of collective approach to petitioning a kind of the curriculum design in a school alongside the learners who we might hope would like to support more arts provision in that system. Articulation is a great example, though, also of kind of the elevation of students' capacity to talk about our subject and advocate for it in those sorts of forums which extend beyond the institution. And I think the NSEAD itself is a good example, of course, of the potential collectivist power of finding those sort of allies in an institutional sort of space where you can talk to others. And I know in the particular space of ITE, we've found a community very fruitful in terms of bringing together our own experiences as kind of one advocacy group. So anything we can do collectively, I think, it is helpful in that way.
We love the collective. Marlene.
Yes, so I mean, so much of what we talked about is so multifaceted, isn't there? There's so many aspects that feed into it. And one of the things, because I've had the fortune of working very closely with Zenab on various things, and one of the things that I've been fortunate to have seen and to be involved with is where Zenab is involved parents in workshops. So I think parents and their support of what happens in schools, their voice, their advocacy, seeing how our subject affects their children is powerful. So, having, the work that we do as NSEAD to support teachers in advocating not only for the subject, but how they then communicate the power and the importance of our subject to parents. And I've seen it happen through, as I say, the work that Zenab is doing in her school, where artists are involved alongside parents, and senior leadership team then seeing how that then enriches the lives of young people who so desperately need it.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And you bring it right back to the learners, Marlene, as always. And Carol.
Yeah, I mean, this is part in response to the previous question, but also there's a later question in the chat that is really raising the issue of perhaps people in rural communities that maybe don't have such immediate access to cultural institutions on their doorstep. It was interesting, quite a few of the schools that we actually interviewed were in rural communities, and particularly I interviewed teachers in Warwickshire and North Bucks as well. I think it's always tempting to think that the grass is greener on the other side. So you assume that just because the school is in London or Birmingham, that teachers are able to take pupils out to galleries all the time. In reality, actually, they may only be able, given the same number of days as a school in the back of beyond. So that's the first thing to say. Please don't imagine that every school in London is perfect. It's really not. However, there was quite a obvious difference in terms of ability to innovate in terms of curriculum design between the schools that were in kind of cultural hotspots like London and Birmingham and those were outside. But I think there are loads of strategies that art teachers who do feel lonely and isolated can use. So, engaging with NSEAD, but also there is, in every region of the country, there is a kind of can't remember what the term is, like an umbrella organisation through which funding is directed through the Arts Council, through government, to be kind of then spent on projects that engage communities. They're called different things in different parts of the country, but it's, engage with them because they find they really want to work with schools, and their remit, their funding is dependent on them doing that, and often they find it very difficult to make contact with teachers and to get into schools. So they'd be really happy for you to contact them. And then the other thing is to work with local artists. So they may not be the big names, but actually often they're willing to give time for free, not always, but to engage in collaborative work and to use your alumni also. Keep in touch with your students, find out where they go and then bring them back. Over the years, there's been some really interesting projects I've seen done in schools where they've perhaps given a corner of a classroom as a studio space to an alumni that's just graduated, and it kind of sparks really interesting conversations between them and the students in the classroom. So I think you need to be creative and reach out and connect with people.
Fantastic. I like that idea of an alumni corner, and that really speaks to peer-to-peer inspiration.
Yeah.
Absolutely. We've got so many questions, and we could stay and answer them for another hour, but people have to go and do the things they've got to do now. So I'm going to have to close that, but we will, as I say, harvest these and get a bit of a kind of conversation paper out to you. And there's some specific questions that we will certainly make sure we give you the answers to. Things about the dates that certain reports are going to be released and so on. So I'm going to just close now. Obviously, thank you to our fantastic panel of speakers and our amazing delegates and all those kind of insightful questions. We've had some really compelling examples and evidence of the experiences of children and young people this morning. So this is the information that we have. This is what we've got in our hands. I've got lots of confidence that I am part of a very well-informed community. The next part of the day is begins at 1 p.m. and we're going to shift the mood completely and swing the focus inwards to our fantastic workforce and thinking about how we nurture you. We're going to be guided through reflections by artist Christopher Samuels and coach Sarah Fox. So it's going to be a wonderful session. For those of you who are joining us at 1 p.m, there will be a new link for session 2. So make sure that you've got that. Everything kind of come to you direct to email. I think you might be able to access those through Eventbrite now, but that's quite problematic technically for Eventbrite. So check your emails, check the chat where Diane has posted them. And any problems, you know what to do. Email us and we will get you in at 1 p.m. So thanks. So yeah, 1 p.m. We're on time. Thank you to all. Enjoy your lunch.